explosive round would take a timed paper fuse or a Borman fuse, and they'd prepare it for the right number of seconds or quarter seconds based on the range called out by the gunner, and they would send it forward in the pass pouch to the gun. The pass pouch was important to keep rain or snow off the round, keep it from soaking into the powder cartridge. It kept the round from being dropped. It protected it if the grass or brush was on fire, which frequently happened when you fire black powder artillery, or if a strike by a nearby Confederate or other round were to hit, the flash would have less danger of setting off the powder bag. Private Michael Sullivan of this battery at the Battle of Antietam chose to disregard that advice and carry the round forward in his hands. The powder bag was a little bit leaky. A strike by a nearby Confederate round flashed over and set off the powder bag, and it crippled him for life. Something that certainly would not have happened if he'd used the safety equipment provided, and there's a lesson in that for us today. The crew would clean out the vent in the back. During the Civil War, they didn't do that with every round. Primers and black powder is extremely gritty and dirty. If the vent was starting to get clogged up, to make the insertion of the primers a little bit sticky, they'd brush it out. Otherwise, they would just continue. They would use a thumb stall over the thumb, seal off the back vent to keep any air from getting in. So when you're working the sponges and the rammers, if there's anything smoldering from a cloth powder bag still in there, if air is being sucked in through there, it's going to flame it up, just like the bellows on a forge. So they wanted to cut off the air. You will notice that the crewman, with sealing the breech, has his arm up like this. That's so the gunner, if things get a little bit hurried, he could sight underneath his arm on the piece while they're preparing the rest of the gun for firing. In the meantime, the guys back at the limber chest have the round prepared, send it forward. The gunner would inspect it to make sure that it's the round that he called for. Ammunition during the Civil War was color-coded, so he could tell at a glance what they had in that bag. The gun would be wormed out. If there are pieces of the powder bag still in there, it would be drawn out. They did not do that with every shot in the Civil War. Only when the sponge was dragging out a lot of unburned or smoldering nasty junk. Then they would go in with a damp but not wet sponge. They wouldn't get that sponge sopping wet and stuff it down there. If you do that, you could leave a pool of water in the back at the base of the breech, which would create a very unsafe condition, number one. Number two, it would soak into the powder bag and render that powder less effective. The ranges on the shells are based on a specific type of ammunition and a specific weighting of powder, and if part of it was rendered poorly operable, it would affect the range and performance of that round. Once the round was in, with the powder bag to the back, it would be pushed back to the breech. They would signal that the gun is prepared to fire. This is also something they did not necessarily do during the Civil War. As reenactors, we do it to make sure that there's an extra safety, and you can see the rammer up on the sponge. Although I have to tell you that hand signals were very important and other visual aids during the Civil War. If you're a battery commander running 6 guns and they're spread out at over 100 yards and you have smoke all over the battlefield and things are noisy, you need to be able to take at a glance and tell what step of the firing line each of your guns is at, so you know how soon they could be brought into action and what they could do as a battery. Acknowledged. Hold number 1. After the powder bag is pierced when it's rammed home, they would insert a friction primer on a lanyard, which, as you see, a friction primer is a little piece of pipe about like this that has a compound in it and a twisted wire hooked up to the lanyard. When the lanyard is pulled, it'll jerk that wire out, like drawing a match over a striker, flame up the compound, shoot down into the powder bag. The powder bag will ignite, push the shell forward. Enough of it will flash around the shell to light the time fuse. And if they estimated the range correctly and they cut the fuse correctly and the fuse was properly made and it wasn't damp or damaged, the round would fly down range for the right number of seconds or parts of seconds and explode. If any one of those things was off, it might not explode at all. Gun number 1, commence firing.
Here we go. Here we go. Fire. Woo! That first little part was guys.